Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. In supporting many other autistics through coaching, I have learned that the principles of occupational therapy can be really helpful to us as autistics. That's why I'm excited to talk with Elizabeth Sherman on today's episode to discuss her occupational therapy practice and the importance of sensory profiles. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thanks, Doug. I'm excited to be here.
And I wanted to start our conversation by learning about your story in the autistic community. Where does it begin?
Sure. So I was diagnosed a couple years ago during the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic emergency. The reason I pursued a diagnosis was because I was living with my then partner at the time, and we just started to notice a lot of kind of like very obvious differences between the two of us. And I'm an occupational therapist and had kind of always worked within the autistic community. I knew like a lot of different autistic folks in my hometown and my local like current town at the time. Yeah, and it just sort of all kind of built up to that point where there was just this moment again in the middle of COVID where my partner and I were upset with each other yet again, and I was realizing that like I couldn't not see that I was definitely on the spectrum. So I got a formal neuropsych eval at the time, and I did get diagnosed. So yes.
Now, you mentioned you're an occupational therapist and you're the founder of an independent occupational therapy practice that offers support to children and families along with autistic and neurodivergent adults. Why did you decide to create an independent therapy practice instead of joining another practice or working at a hospital or another environment?
Yeah, so I've worked in a lot of different settings, and both settings that, primarily supported autistic people and settings that didn't, like a skilled nursing facility. And I started my practice actually before I got diagnosed autistic. So my diagnosis changed a lot about what I do for work primarily. It definitely like shifted my focus to primarily autism. And yeah, the reason I feel like I've had to grow an independent practice is because a lot of the other settings that I worked in were not as neurodiversity affirming and didn't have the flexibility that I wanted to be able to work with people. Yeah, so I ended up building an independent practice, and I see adults on a like all of my adult clients on a sliding scale because I know I'm not able to bill insurance for the OT that I offer because it's very much kind of beyond the medical model and beyond what is accepted by insurance as far as medically necessary OT. Yeah, so there's just very much a gap, I guess, in neurodiversity affirming services that aren't so restricted by a deficit or medical based model. And I would say that's like the main reason why I am still in independent practice.
Insurance is such a major issue, focusing
Yeah.
on the medical model. What are the types of things you do to support your clients that you aren't able to bill for insurance purposes?
Yeah. So I see like two different, I would say, like kind of populations. Like I see families and then I see adults. For families, the number one thing is parent coaching, being able to work with parents, being able to go into the home and do, what I think is classic OT, where I'm going in at like the after school routine and all of the family occupations like dinner and bath and bedtime, but I'm not doing a lot of like therapeutic exercise or interventions that show linear progress. I'm doing a lot more like relationship based and a lot of reflection for parents as far as parents learning like different lenses to understand their child's behavior. And sometimes it's hard to quantify that that experience. So that's what I do for families that isn't necessarily covered by insurance in the medical model. But for adults, a lot of my adult clients I see on a lesser frequency. I'm not seeing them every week trying to build skills or like I said, exercise, therapeutic exercise is a common like OT intervention. I'm not working with them to try to rehabilitate some kind of injury that they've had. I'm more seeing them to work on living with their neurotype, understanding, why they do certain things, and then sort of slowly working to kind of build daily life routines that work for them. So it feels like the work that I'm doing is very much in the scope of OT practice, but for some reason it's not considered medically necessary so that insurance would bill for it. Yeah. And I like to see people as needed. So I don't like to say you need this many therapy sessions with me before you'll have your life back on track and understand what it means to be autistic and how that affects your occupations. Like I like to say, you know yourself and I'm here for you when you need me and when you're looking for that support. So how often makes sense for you?
You were talking a little bit earlier about things being relationship based, which I think is so
Uh-huh.
critical. And through your practice, I read that you strive to build connection with every client as you collaborate together to kind of guide them through the occupational therapy support process. So, what are some principles that you found that are helpful to collaborate with your clients to build that connection?
Yeah, sure. I think the main thing that's really important to me is, I mean, if I pick two, like community, number one, and agency and autonomy, I would say would be number two. A lot of autistic people don't have access to community, and I feel like it's part of the reason. Like, if you don't see yourself in anyone around you, then of course you are maybe at risk for thinking negatively about the way that you do things, the way that you approach life, or seeing yourself as a problem. And so I think one of the main focuses of the OT services I provide adults is getting a good idea of what their current community looks like and identifying ways to like tap into the autistic or neurodivergent community as they're able to. And I think the way that supports the relationship that I have with clients is honestly that I feel like they know I'm not trying to just keep them coming back to therapy or keep them dependent on me. Like, I'm like, no, I want you to have like a whole fleet of autistic people in your friendship circle. I don't want to be, even if I'm the first autistic person that you've ever sat down and talked to about your life or your medical history. I don't want that to be the case like 6 months from now. We want you to have an outlet into the autistic community. And I just continue to, I don't mind like getting an email from someone who's realized they don't need to see me anymore, but they just still want to stay in touch because we valued that kind of community first priority. And then I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with agency. I really try not to tell people what I think they need to do or what they have to do. I don't put a lot of ultimatums on staying in treatment with me. People can cancel their appointments. I celebrate the days when I get a text and someone's like, I'm really not feeling well and I don't think I can come today. I'm like, that's great. I'm so glad you recognize that. And I'm so happy to support you in canceling your appointment. I feel like sometimes with people, it's interesting to watch that kind of go down in the therapeutic relationship where, someone's kind of wondering how I'm going to respond when they want to cancel their appointment. And then after a few times and they get it, like, oh, this person really wants me to listen to myself and do whatever I need to do. Yeah, it's just cool to watch how the relationship kind of takes off from there.
Now, you mentioned a couple of methods of communication, email and text, and I think there might not be a day that goes by that I don't think about preferred method of communication. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times businesses are not aware of this concept whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
So I know people are contacting you about services. They can call the dreaded phone call, but some people might want to do that. They can email, but they can also text. So
Yeah.
texting's definitely my preferred method of communication. So I was wondering what kind of feedback have you gotten from people that appreciate the ability to text you to learn about your services?
Usually, like some relief. Yeah. I have a texting app on my phone, so it doesn't even go into like my regular messages. It kind of holds them all in a little app. I always tell clients that during the first visit, I'm like, no, it really is okay to text me and I will see it, and it won't, even if you text me at 2 a.m., it's not going to make a notification or anything. You're not going to wake me up. I'll just get it whenever is good for you when I go into the app. Yeah, and just most people are just relieved and they're like, this just makes it so much easier. I don't have to, like, not so many steps, for executive functioning. Yeah, and I just sort of, as a general rule, I like don't answer the phone. So even if people do call and leave like a voicemail, I usually wait, listen to the voicemail, follow up, when I'm ready. And it kind of just goes both ways, that I would also prefer to be texted or emailed.
I've met so many autistic adults who have never filled out a sensory profile, and
Yeah.
it's always very surprising to me. So,
Yeah.
can you talk about how you've helped adults complete sensory profiles and how that's kind of impacted their lives?
Yeah. Well, so I even waited a really long time to fill out a sensory profile because I was thinking like, oh, I know myself, like I got this. I do this every day. But I remember filling my own out and thinking like, wow, I'm so autistic. I was laughing. I was like, I joke about having low registration, not noticing things, and then it comes up as like much more than others. And yeah, anyway, as far as clients go, I just feel like it's sort of a way to empower people to understand more about their body. Again, like I really don't like to take any kind of like expert stance on it. I like to provide a lot of client education in a way that's like, yeah, you actually already know this about your body, but here's how, to organize and use that information. Here's what it means. Here's what's happening in your body when you notice that you feel so zoned out that you're on a whole nother planet. And it takes time, and I've noticed people appreciate being able to kind of, make appointments with me as they need to, and then to ask those questions as they kind of go back out after doing a sensory profile and experience life and notice new things about themselves. And they're like, oh, that's what we were talking about in OT. I want to talk some more about that because I think it's happening in other places in my life too. Yeah. And I guess, just the last thing I want to say as a clinician, it's a relief to kind of be in a comfortable place with helping people complete a sensory profile, but not to change their sensory profile. Like I started OT sort of being taught how to reduce, sensory sensitivities, change, sensory processing. And it's just a really kind of breath of fresh air experience to fill out a sensory profile with someone, to learn more how to like accommodate themselves for who they actually are instead of trying to change who they are.
A little bit earlier, we were talking about developing community, and I think sensory differences greatly, impact our opportunities in developing communities.
Mm-hmm.
So you're currently developing a course right now that I'm really interested in about. It's about the environment and community. So tell me all about this course.
Yeah. Yeah, so I actually just got done teaching I'm almost done teaching the first round of it. So it's two courses, Environment Community 1, Environment Community 2, and it's for occupational therapy students. And I tell them when they come in that the point of this class is to learn how you can change and adjust everything in the environment around you to support a person's access, to their life, to the things that they want to do every day, instead of changing that person. I'm like, in other courses, you're going to learn about different disorders and, treatment interventions and how you're going to work with people to help them achieve their goals. But in this class, we're really going to focus on how can you shift people's access to support in relationships? How can we shift the man-made environment? How can we develop products, technology, equipment that helps people? How do we shift attitudes towards disability, and what kinds of interventions can eventually have an effect on attitudes? And then how to address services, systems, and policies, because those are all environmental factors in our practice framework. Yeah, it's just been really cool to get to address the environment then, like, as an autistic person, because I come into the class and I'm like, yeah, there's a lot about the environment that's unjust. There's a lot about our current systems and policies that don't work for people. And as OTs, we have a really unique scope of practice where we can prove like why the environment needs to change. And yeah, so right now they're working on projects to actually make shifts in the environment, in different areas, practice areas that they're interested in. And I'm just like really proud of our first group of students at how like creative they've been, and kind of honing in on their own passions and coming up with ideas that could facilitate greater access for people.
Was this for some of those students? Was this somewhat of like a culture shock? Like they had not thought about the environment before and its impacts?
Yeah, you know what? For some of them it was, but I think I've actually been like really impressed by how this seems to be a more like accepted norm for the age group that I currently work with. That they seem to come in a little bit more culturally aware than I remember myself being when I was in OT school. So I've been really impressed at how quickly they seem to take to the idea of occupational injustice and what our role is in addressing the environment for people. Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth, how can our listeners learn about you and your services beyond this interview?
You can visit my website that very much needs updated because I just finished my PhD a little bit ago and I've just been doing a lot of resting. So my website is heartofgoldpgh.com. And then there are Facebook and Instagram pages that are attached to it if you start clicking around on there. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate the conversation, Elizabeth. I think occupational therapists are so helpful to us as autistics, and really, really great when it come across OTs, especially have like practices like yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I love my practice. I feel like super grateful that I get to practice like in my own community.
Thanks so much to Elizabeth for the conversation. To learn more about Elizabeth and her occupational therapy practice, please check out the link in the podcast description of this episode. At Autism Personal Coach, our clients are the experts, our coaches are the guides. The majority of supports for autistics are not helpful. They try to fix us, not support us. That's why many are confused when we say our clients are the experts, experts of their lived experience. Our clients are the experts for what's worked for them and about the things that they need and want in their lives. Our coaches first listen to our clients, then ask thoughtful questions, offer resources, and strategize with our clients so they can get what they need to thrive. Would you want a guide in your life to coach you to get the things that you desire? If so, then visit autismpersonalcoach.com for more information. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism Stories, and if you did, if you could tell a friend, foe, or anyone you know about it so they could have the same enjoyable and educational experience as you when listening to autism stories, it would be very much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.